So let's talk a little bit about the definition of enumeration. So an enumeration is basically an exact listing of all the elements of a set. And that's kind of the dictionary definition of what an enumeration is. What that really means is that enumeration is just a collection of things that is all of those things. So if you were to enumerate through an enumeration, you would be going through every single item that is in that set. And a good way to think about this is months of a year. For example, months of the year are a finite set. That means that there are exactly 12 months in our standard year. And if you wanted to go through all those months, we could enumerate through all of them. So that's where the name enumeration comes from. And an enumeration in Java is basically a type that we are going to declare that is going to have all of the members that belong to that set. So if we declared an enumeration of months, we could have every single month of the year in that enumeration. So why should we use something like this in Java or in programming in general? Well, one of the most important reasons for enumerations is that it is a great way of naming things. It is really easy to identify something in an enumeration. It really makes it so that you don't have to try to come up with using strings or integers or some other type to name something, because an enumeration allows you to put all the names of one thing into one place that you can access it. So for example, we might create an enumeration called months, and then in that enumeration we might have named types that correspond to every single month of the year. Along with that, what we are going to get is some type safety. So if we create an enumeration of months, we would be able to type the words months and hit dot in Eclipse, for example, and then we would be able to see what all the options that are available to us instead of using strings, for example. So let's look at an example here. I will create a constant string that stores the name of a month. Now, what if I misspell this? If I want to check to see if 2 months are equal, I have to check, do some string comparison to check these two strings. Enumeration is type safe, and what that means is that you can't compare this to the wrong type. And a month that has the same name is going to be the exact same when you compare two enumerations. Another thing enumerations really do for you is they limit input. And limiting input is really important. It is one of those things in programming languages that makes an algorithm a lot simpler. If you can restrict the input coming into a method, you can really define what needs to happen in that method a lot easier. For example, if you had a method that took in an integer to represent the month, the calendar month, and the year instead of enumeration, you are going to have to check to see what if they entered a negative number. What if they enter a number greater than 12? Is it 0 index or does it start out 1? For example, does month 1 mean January or does month 0 mean January? So you are going to have to check all these things, but by using an enumeration, you are going to limit that input. And then of course, it groups things in a set. We kind of already talked about this, and enumerations are iterable. And that means that if you wanted to loop through all the months in a year, you could basically do this. And I will show you how to do this using an enumeration. But if you imagine that if you just had a bunch of string constants that you are using for months, it would be a lot harder to do that. There wouldn't be a good way of getting through every single one of those unless you put them into some collection or list. But an enumeration basically gives you that for free. So when should you use an enumeration in Java? A lot of people are confused when to use an enumeration. So I usually say, if you can use an enumeration, do it as much as possible. And of course, you are not going to use an enumeration in every single case. But in a lot of cases where you think you might be able to benefit from an enumeration, just go ahead and use one, because it is going to really be beneficial a lot of time to constrain input. If I had to kind of give two general rules of when to use an enumeration, one would be in place of string constants. So any place that you are putting some constants in your code that are strings, and you are going to have to do any kind of comparison of them, that is probably a good place to use an enumeration. And then the other one is when you are using integers as types. And so a good example of this is that month example, where we are passing in an integer to represent a month of the year, a type basically, a type of something. Maybe you have some kind of command processing system and you are using integers to represent the different types of commands. Command 0, command 1, command 2, and you basically have mapped them to some name that you have given that command. Instead, an enumeration might be more beneficial.